Let's get to Doug Mastriano. Colonel just got back from Lithuania. Doug, thanks for being with us.
Interesting trip because I was there when Donald Trump's peace plan. Look, he's brokered peace now in 8 or 9 different other countries around the world, like between Cambodia and Thailand and Azerbaijan and Armenia, places that most people don't know where there's serious wars going on, especially over Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan, Armenia. And so Donald Trump is the peace president. And 2 Thursdays ago, the plan leaked out. I was in a meeting with 25 international ambassadors in Vilnius, Lithuania, and this stuff wasn't televised, so we could have frank discussions, which is good because the cameras come on and people have to be more guarded. And a lot of hand wringing by our European allies, our NATO allies, and obviously there's people from Ukraine, their leaders from Ukraine, wringing their hands over this and condemning the American plan before they even saw it. Just the crap that New York Times and CNN was talking about. And then that night we had a kickoff event where the foreign minister of Lithuania was a keynote speaker, Minister Budras, and he took some questions, and they're all questions focused on the American plan. And I got to love this guy. You got to love Lithuania. He goes, okay, I hear you. Where's your plan? And they shut up. And guess what, John? A week later, suddenly I'm watching on BBC, the same people a week and a half ago are blasting the plan as naive and it's going to undermine peace in the region. Now they think it's a fantastic plan, as well as the same Europeans that were crying about it a week and a half ago. So I don't know where you go from here. I know Donald Trump is brilliant. He laid out a diagram and said, this is serious, get to the table. Everyone came to the table that mattered. The Europeans caught up. They put their own little tweaks on it, that's how a negotiation goes. They're stakeholders as well. They live in the region. They want a bigger Ukrainian army than what we proposed initially, and a few other tweaks here to guarantee Ukrainian assurance of peace. But in the end, the plan is still Donald Trump's, and he got him to the table despite all the whining and crying. I love it.
How is this going to go? I mean, do you think this, because, Putin was bombing Kiev again last night with the drones. Where do you see this? I mean, is there a chance this thing holds?
I think there is a good chance. I mean, it's as much pressure and emphasis that Donald Trump's put on this. He had, Marco Rubio is constantly on top of this. You're doing a fantastic job, by the way. The chief of staff of the army was part of the negotiations as well. Good guy. It is a top priority right now internationally / Venezuela. So there's something else that's going on. So I think with so much pressure being put on Putin militarily, he's losing so many people and so much equipment, pressure economically and militarily on Zelensky that this fund of $300 billion from America is not eternal. And this war can't last forever for them. And if the Europeans see this, so we have to strike a balance. So this is the challenge right now. How do we institute a peace plan that isn't 1938? A lot of the hand wringing, of course, with my European friends that I was with in Lithuania at this fantastic conference, by the way, was, hey, we Europeans, not we, the United States, they gave away the Sudetenland, the strategic mountainous regions of Western Czechoslovakia to Hitler, and Hitler promised peace. And then the next year, of course, that same year, he occupies all of Czechoslovakia. And then the next year, he attacks Poland and World War II begins. And so the Europeans want solid guarantees that if Putin behaves badly, which he will, if he goes after land deeper or changes things in Ukraine, that there's a solid response. That's going to be the sticking point in the end. I think the land decision, this land bridge behind me, that's a foregone conclusion. Putin's going to have a land bridge to Crimea, that red zone. But how do we assure peace? That's the sticking point.
Let me tell you something interesting. You ready?
I'm ready.
So 2 weeks ago when this first came out, when the first blueprint came out, right here in the studio where I am now, I had a chance to sit down for an hour with Ukrainian new ambassador to the U.S., Olga Stefaninicha. And it was a great hour. It's been up on YouTube. And I'm savvy enough not to ask her direct, do you support this peace plan? Because she's got to hear from Zelensky and others. She's the ambassador, not the decision maker. So I asked questions that delved into her instincts about it, right? And it was obvious if you watch that. Multiple times she said she was in agreement with it in principle, that they were tired of war, they wanted to find a way out and end the war, right? That was like 8 days ago. Wow. Then she has an interview with Newsmax a week later, And of course, Newsmax's people are 100% for, like, you know, Ukraine, all the money, the whole bit. And so she then blasted the peace plan. So within 7 days, it goes from our people are tired of war, we want peace, we got to find a way to make this out, to I don't like anything about it.
It's a wicked problem. When we deal with hard issues in the war college here in Carlisle, we say it's a wicked problem. This is a wicked problem. That's a New England kind of term for something that's very difficult. And it is complex. Look, the Ukrainians have fought valiantly. I was surprised when they were able to drive back the Russian airborne and paratrooper units on day 2 of the invasion back in February 2022 when the war began. That's some of Putin's best troops, and they beat them. And they've been holding a line, although outnumbered 10-1. And Russia has vast resources, and time is against Ukraine's side. And we're seeing that right now as Russia. The circles on the maps are where Russian troops had advanced. It's slow. It's World War I-esque kind of advance, but they're making headway. And I'm hearing problems as far as logistically in Ukraine, manpower, getting people to the front lines. And so it needs to end. And the solution's not going to be good for everybody here. But in the end, John, and I think the whiplash you experienced from Ambassador Olga is they want it to end, but they don't like the outcome because Putin's going to get a chunk of land in the eastern part of the country.
Well, you're not going to be able to stop that because he's occupying the land.
Yeah, that's right.
And to get into this whole argument about they're Russian-speaking people, they prefer it. Look, that doesn't matter. I think in reality, he occupies the land. They've lost 1.2 million men and women. Think about that. 1,200,000 men and women from the Russian Federation are either maimed or dead. That is an enormous number. Now, you're not even counting Cubans, North Koreans, who she said they put there as drone fodder. I mean, you think about this. They were putting those North Korean troops out there just to find out where the drones were. They were getting blown up. No regard for life. No, zero. And of course, Kim doesn't either. But I mean, you're not going to get him out of there. And so the alternative is this goes on. And I like what the president said. You're either going to accept this or we're done. And then you're on your own. And you and Germany and France and Macron, you all can figure it out. I'm done. I think that's the position he's got to take.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the only reason, John, as you rightly said, that the key members came to the table. Donald Trump is throwing down the gauntlet. Like, this has to end. And when the plan was presented, it was like this or nothing. But that's a negotiation technique. And of course, now there's compromise, and maybe we'll get the Ukrainians from 600,000 soldiers to 800,000. I mean, that's stuff behind the scenes and all that. But Donald Trump is driving this. He proved to be brilliant once again. I heard all the hand wringing and crying, the day that the plan was leaked. And then in the end, it's a winner, and the Europeans now are praising it. BBC and Sky News, not fans of American foreign policy, even with Sky News, sadly, which is generally conservative. But GBI and others, even German networks now praising the plan. Now, I did speak specific. Now, I have many friends in leadership in Lithuania. Served with them 4 years in NATO, deployed 3 times with them in a NATO assignment in Afghanistan. Very close to many people there. And I said, what do you do with this tidbit? I said, there's a view on the American side here that since Putin paid such a high price for the eastern portion of Ukraine, as we see in the map here behind me, 1 million plus casualties, is that enough? Is it just too much of a cost for him to go further? And my friends in Lithuania, who live in the region, who've lived under Soviet occupation, suffered terribly underneath Soviet domination, don't want to have that ever again. Single-handedly fought the Soviets for 10 years after World War II also, by the way. Quite heroic people. They said the loss of 1 million is nothing to Putin. He'll recruit another 1 million-man army, and they're convinced that without strong security guarantees, he'll go further and deeper. My view on how this might play out is what we saw and are seeing right now in the nation of Georgia. In 2007, Putin launched it, and he's been there for 20-some years. Wow. In 2007, he was leading the country. And after the Olympics, he launched an invasion of the nation of Georgia. And there's 2 breakaway republics in Georgia. One is called Abkhazia. The other one is South Ossetia. They didn't want to be part of the Georgian community, and Russia came to their rescue wages, rescue quote unquote in quotation marks, like he did over here in Ukraine, invaded the country, fought Georgia, took those countries, now has done a vote, and the people want us. Of course, they're going to want you. We know how that goes. And a chunk of Georgia now is under Russian hands. And what this conflict in the invasion in Georgia did 2007, it created a frozen conflict. We had, at the time of the invasion, John, we had American soldiers and NATO troops on the ground. My headquarters actually was deploying at that moment for an exercise in Georgia. An American National Guard unit was in Georgia. So they were going to join NATO. What Russia did by annexing a chunk of Georgia, it's a frozen conflict. He froze them out of NATO. They can't be NATO members. They're going to have to, acknowledge that they don't have anything to do with those lands anymore, and they won't do that. And now here's what's going to happen potentially with Ukraine. Putin might say, okay, the eastern part of the country is enough for me, and then he'll do what he did in Georgia. He'll ensure that a proxy pro-Russian, pro-Moscow candidate wins the elections and turns the country back on its head again. And I think when Zelensky's gone, Putin's going to work behind the scenes, as the Russians are very astute at doing, and put a puppet in power, and then we've lost everything once again.
So what's the antidote for that?
Well, internal politics, we saw, Victoria Nuland and others from the U.S. Department of State play with politics in Ukraine, perhaps setting conditions for the troubles we see here. I think it's a very dangerous thing. I think the best bet to avoid that is now have first a peace deal with firm security guarantees, firmer than 1994. Ukraine has promised peace by the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine to give up all its nukes as the third largest nuclear-powered country in the world. Nuclear arms, weapons, bombs. They gave it up, believing they were going to be protected by the superpowers. They weren't. So they're going to need serious security guarantees. And I say that's time for us to look to the EU. EU, you step in economically, help them rebuild using that Russian money, $100 and some million that's set aside or whatever, and keep the country on a democratic footing, headed in the right direction to push back Russian influence. But it's number one, stop the war, and number two is to rebuild the country. And by rebuilding under the proxy of the EU, I think we could keep it from going the way Georgia has gone.
All right, let's take a phone call. We have Vic in Florida for Colonel Mastriano, Senator Mastriano. Go ahead, Vic.
Good morning, gentlemen. Doug, I really appreciate your input on international affairs. I thought your discussion was terrific. I'm not sure where I come down on this, but I'm 100% MAGA, and I don't want to see any security guarantees that could be a potential tripwire, and for American involvement. And I think a lot of us feel this way. To change this subject just a tiny bit, I'm really concerned, coming from a military family, about Senator Mark Kelly and his remarks. You've noticed that he's putting out these hypotheticals as if that somehow insulates him from any kind of punishment or prosecution. I'm old enough to remember a couple of things very clearly and how it impacted our own family. In 1972-73, there were several B-52 pilots that refused to fly missions from Thailand into Vietnam during the negotiations in Paris with Henry Kissinger. Those pilots were severely punished. I'm old enough to remember watching on television with my father, military guy, when General Singlaub, who just criticized Jimmy Carter's plan to remove troops from South Korea, he immediately resigned. Singlaub had been a Jedburgh in World War II, and one of our neighbors, had flown those missions. Very serious business. Wow. So we have situations, and you know what I'm talking about, Doug. This guy is, he's really pushing this, Senator Kelly, and he's trying to build a wedge between the president and the military right now. That's, I think, very dangerous. I'm very concerned about it. You know much more about this than I do, and I just love to hear your opinions. And I'll hang up now, but let us know what you think.
Thank you, Vic. Yeah, and that's one of the concerns as well, I think, that the administration has. What does a security guarantee look like for Ukraine? And I don't see anywhere in that where that's American boots on the ground. Obviously, the European powers, including our Baltic friends, where I just spent a week, and the Germans and others want American boots on the ground because we're the ultimate guarantor. I would say for our NATO allies here is think about my Desert Storm experience. I was the 2nd Cavalry Regiment stationed in northern Bavaria, Franken, and my regiment, the 2nd Armored Cavalry. We were told that if the 8th Guards Tank Army, the Russian-led enemy forces, Soviet forces, if they attacked, that we would last 45 minutes. So we jokingly called ourselves the Great Speed Bump. What was the purpose of that? To guarantee that another 1 million Americans would show up to West Germany because of our loss. So having Americans forward in the eastern and northern flank of the NATO nations is critical as a deterrence to Russia. I don't think there should be American boots on the ground in Ukraine. My view, I don't know where it's going to fall out in the peace plan. That's a slippery slope. It's a non-NATO nation, so that's a whole different topic. The second part of it, you're absolutely right. What Senator Kelly did is just unconscionable. A retired Navy captain. First off, when he displayed his medals, they were out of order. I don't. That's equal to a colonel in the Army, a Navy captain. And if he can't get his crap right, if he can't put his medals, his awards in sequence, that's a serious problem here, because we're the guys that inspect the soldiers or sailors in his case to make sure that their stuff is squared away. So I have a lot of questions. I looked at his service record, a good service record, but how can't you not how to put your awards in proper order? That's a big deal in military circles. I know in civilian circles, people are like, whatever. It's huge. Secondly, I saw that, Vic. I saw that in Lithuania. I had landed. I think it was the day I arrived. I was jet lagging, didn't sleep on a plane. I was in this awful seat next to a guy taller than me. Good guy, but 7 feet tall, and no sleep. And I'm flipping through social media, and I see Mark Kelly and 5 others telling service members to disobey illegal orders. And my question it was very disconcerting to me, because the message was, we're looking for military members to step outside of the chain of command. It is a fact you can and should disobey illegal orders, like the My Lai massacre that happened in Vietnam under Lieutenant Calley, massacring villagers. That was an illegal order, and people would have been protected under a court martial. But Kelly did not list any order that was illegal. That's the problem. The hypothetical that you mentioned, Vic, is what he's trying to hide behind. You can't do that. If there's a specific order that was given by Secretary Hegseth or President Trump, where is it? Because there is none. All his orders are legal. If you disobey an order, servicemen and women out there, you better, by God, be right that it was illegal, because you will be court-martialed, and judges and a panel will decide whether you defied a legal order. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to go against you unless it's something black and white, and that's very rare. So this undermines the chain of command. It disrupts our military here. This is a very dangerous thing. I wrote many years ago a lithograph that was kind of a pushback on some that an Air Force colonel wrote that I didn't like about politics in the military, and I wrote something to push back on that. And in there I was concerned about the politicians playing with our service members, our character, our obedience to orders here, keeping it unpoliticized. When I was a colonel, I was apolitical. Nobody really knew my views on politics. This kind of action by Senator Kelly and the other 5 here, it undermines that entire professionalism that we have, and it needs to end. He needs to be held accountable.
Doug, before we sign off here, what was his objective? What was their objective? This video, this 5 seditionists. What was their purpose? What did they want to accomplish?
I was wondering that, here I am at a NATO conference, representing de facto. I'm the largest voice they had over there from America. Very honored to be in that position. And then I'm watching this video by a U.S. senator, one of 100 people in our nation, undermining the chain of command. As a professional soldier, so he did 23 years, I did 30 years. Our lives in many ways were dedicated to service. Something has gone wrong, John. I can't know his motives or intentions, but all I do know is the effect. The effect is detrimental to the chain of command. It's detrimental to the good law and order of our military, and there's nothing good that can come from this here. It's a terrible thing. If he had an example of an illegal order, that'd be one thing, but he's trying to paint Donald Trump and the administration as illegitimate, and he's trying to, by doing this, the effect, I believe, is it's telling service members here, not a legitimate chain of command, even though he won the popular vote, won the electoral college, overwhelming victory, has a mandate. but he's trying to undermine the chain of command, and that's going to force a court martial. And Senator Kelly's going to have his day in court.
Interesting. We'll see how it plays out. I think you're right. Their objective is simply to undermine the president, undercut Trump in any way that they can, illegitimize his presidency, create doubt, sow discord, all the things that the communists do. So I was just stunned by that. Yeah. And then one thing that was in that video, it was one of the congressmen, they said, you need to. And one guy said, you must. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, when they take power, everybody's going to be at risk here because he said, you must disobey this order. I mean, it's kind of incredible how far far this country has just fallen into the depth of these communists. I mean, it's just, and that's what they are. This is what communists do. This is not liberals. This is not Birch Bayh, Mo Udall. When I grew up, you had traditional liberals. You didn't agree with them, but they had a different view, but you get to have a conversation. I mean, there's some of the, great Humphrey, Muskie. I mean, these were liberals. Now we're fighting communists. And people just don't understand what we're fighting here. These people are communists. They want to undermine the entire country and take over. And they don't care what the consequences are, Doug. It's just, for the greater good.
I don't know what Senator Kelly was thinking. I mean, he was a professional in the Navy, made 06, which is huge, equal to a colonel. And to do this, what are you thinking, Senator Kelly? You don't do this here.
Undermine Trump. That's it. Delegitimize Trump. That's all they want to do. They hate the guy because of the tremendous success he's having. They can't match it, so they want to undermine him. Doug, I got to sign off. People want to follow you, Doug, at Doug Mastriano, at Doug Mastriano. Great update, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Always great to see you, John. You look great, by the way.
Thank you. And while you were in Lithuania, I hope you and Rebbe had a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Doug.
did. Thank you, brother. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye. We'll be right back. Rabbi Menken is coming up with Paul Teller. Keep it right here.